Good morning, or whatever time it is, everyone. Welcome to another Thursday session of API review. One of these days, we'll get rid of all these red things and go back to only once a week. Um, but we have plenty of red things, so let's get started. Um, Send into file for connected streams 432900. Corey, you're up.
All right. So for streams that are duplex or connected, such as like a TCP socket, there is a feature called Shutdown, at least on socket, that's what it's called, that effectively signals end of file to the other side. Stream.read will start returning 0 once all of the buffer has been consumed. This is important for some protocols, not for others. It is something that we wanted to add for Quick, or rather that we need for Quick, but it's also applicable to things like Network Stream, SSL Stream, possibly others, I don't know, of needing to be able to send a shutdown to make certain protocols work with it. So the proposal here is to, rather than just make a quick API, add it onto Stream. There are a few reasons why. There are a few different options that we came up with, and all of them kind of have pros and cons. We considered having some sort of new base class called like connected stream or duplex stream. We considered having an interface of like iDuplex stream. Both of these options we found break composability. It would be really nice for something like gzip stream to be able to, if it doesn't care about shutdown, it can at least forward it to its base stream. And if we have a new base stream type or a new interface, it kind of breaks that because none of these streams will have a shutdown to forward to. And it probably wouldn't be appropriate for gzip stream to inherit from a connected stream type. So the alternative, or the only thing left, is to add this on Stream. Unfortunately, not many users of Stream actually need this. So it would be kind of additional API burden that most people hopefully ignore, but they'll definitely see, and it'll make it more complicated for them.
Corey, I also had a question that I'd asked of Jeff, and I don't remember what the answer was. So you mentioned SSL Stream.
Yeah.
It's not clear to me what this does on SSL Stream. It can't just call shutdown on the underlying stream because subsequent reads might result in, say, a renegotiation or something that needs to still send data on the underlying stream, right?
Yeah.
So what would SSL Stream do here?
So SSL Stream does have its own like shutdown packet that's specific to TLS. When I think SSL Stream would just not call shutdown until it was completely finished with its own stream on the actual socket, and that's on its underlying stream. It would not call shutdown probably until dispose.
So probably never call shutdown because dispose would do that implicitly.
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the intent of this is not that they should always forward straight down to every stream underneath. It should do whatever is appropriate to that specific stream.
And you also listed pipe stream. What does pipe stream do? There's no, like, named pipes and anonymous pipes, to my knowledge, don't have any I'm done writing but not reading command, do they?
I think Jeff might have added that as a reference to the stream wrapper on a pipe writer. This would call pipe writer.
Not system.io.pipes.pipestream, but pipe reader stream, pipe writer stream.
Yes, the other pipe we have.
Okay.
So what are we doing with these streams that are just wrapping? Like, for example, if you wrap a network stream over a compression stream, for example, what should happen? Should compression stream override it and forward it, or
Yeah, so the expectation is that if you don't care, you should forward it. And as part of a PR for this, we'd be looking at and updating any applicable stream classes that we have in the BCL.
And in the very common case for several years, where other streams that we don't own don't override these, what reasoning can a consumer do about behavior? The way we expect people to actually be checking can shutdown.
We do. It's really important to have this can shutdown property here. Essentially, if you need shutdown behavior, then it's your app will hang if the stream doesn't actually implement it. So we need some way for and HTTP 1.0 is the easy example here. It requires this shutdown. So anything taking a stream, it would check can shutdown right and throw if it was not shutdownable.
Well, today
Why?
we just call it dispose.
Yes, today we would call dispose, and it would hang our app because in HTTP 1.0, the server needs to have the full request before it can send its response, and it has no idea of knowing if your request is finished if you don't send shutdown. So essentially, this would manifest as like a hang whenever someone calls read async, when they're expecting the remote side to have some sort of message for them.
But if you just close the stream, it'll send fin, which is the ultimate shutdown.
Yes, this is specifically for a scenario where you want to shut down your writes, which indicates the peer to start sending you data. So you would shut down writes, you would be done writing, and then you would continue reading.
Okay, so that's why it's shut down right and not write. Shutdown is its.
You are shutting down the write part of the stream.
Okay. That makes sense once you say it that way, but looking at the method, it just looks like it's named wrong.
Yeah, so we started with shutdown because that's sort of the socket terminology. Another proposal is complete because pipewriter has a complete method on it, so we would at least be consistent with the other stream type that we have. Finish write was another alternative, something like that, just to indicate that you are finished writing and the other side can start sending you whatever it needs.
Yeah, in some other types, I think we call this final flush, but it's a similar concept.
The comment says you can't use end write for obvious reasons. I'm not coming up with any. What are the obvious reasons?
End write is part of the old async pattern.
Okay.
Begin write and end write.
Okay. It's already there. That would be an obvious reason. I apparently have purged iasync result entirely from my brain.
You are lucky. Only we could do that from the BCL.
We can make this new product called .NET Core and get rid of all the methods we don't want. Oh, wait.
Yeah, but then in like 4 years, we're going to have to bring it all back.
I feel like it was only 2. Okay, so... Alright. I don't know about anybody else, but I need to reparse now that it means something different than I thought it was.
What did you think it was?
So I know that in the context of SSL stream, which since that was mentioned, that is what I got loaded. There's the when you're closing the stream, do you send the nice, hey, by the way, I'm going away. You can throw away your encryption resources, as opposed to like something notices that the socket died and then it goes on a resource cleanup, and so there's. So I thought it was. I have a message that I would like to write as part of shutting down. Please go write that message. Which would be write shutdown instead of shutdown write, and now I've learned that that's not what it does at all, and I need to think again.
So why do we need this for write but not for read?
So socket does have a way to shut down reads. It's actually very, very rare to call that. We have no code that calls that today. Quick also has kind of a similar thing to shutdown read, but also not. Shutdown write seems to be the least common denominator between all of these things. Shutting down reads is a little more esoteric and would not apply to like SSL stream.
The thing about shutting down reads is that it's not really a graceful thing, right? You know, when you're talking about writing, the way that this works in sockets and in Quick and other places is typically you write a bunch of data and then you shut down write, and that will actually send an EOF across to the peer. You'll be able to, as they are reading, they will get a 0 from their bytes read that actually indicates that EOF has been hit. There's no real, so that's graceful in the sense that it's the person who's writing controls when they are done writing. The person who's reading doesn't control when they're done reading, right? I mean, they can stop reading, of course, but it's the peer who's deciding to send data to them. So you can abort the read, and in effect, if you call shutdown read on socket, what it effectively does is abort the read. In other words, it basically says to the socket stack, I'm not expecting any more data to come. If any more data does come, then send a reset to the peer, because that's a protocol error, not a TCP level protocol error, but it's I've considered that I'm not expecting any more, and if they do, then I want them to know that their data was not read. Quick has something similar to abort the read side as well, but we don't want to. And in Quick, in fact, we are going to expose a read method that will allow you to do that and allows you to specify an error code as well. But it's an abortive thing, not a completion thing. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah, so I think the high level takeaway is generally the sender of the data is the one who says there's no more data.
Yeah,
like
right.
The receiver, like Jeff said, just gets a signal saying, I have no more data for you. And the receiver says, okay, great.
Yes.
Yeah, and they generally can't say, by the way, I'm done listening.
I mean, they could just choose not to listen.
Right. But they
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
the reader can't communicate, I'm done listening, because they would have to write that.
So one of the
Yeah, so then
proposed names in here was closed write. Like, why not do that? It matches the close method.
Yeah, and then I would say part of the confusion here, I think, is that write is singular, and that if it was like close writes, you can no longer write after you've closed writes.
I would prefer writes plural as well.
Yeah.
We had a kind of debate, depending on if English is your first language, apparently writes is a little more complicated to understand.
In contrast to this feature, which is very easy to explain. No, I think the other question I have is who is calling this method? Like, who is expected to do can shutdown write and then call that method? Like which part of the stack would do that?
So here's an example close to Jeremy's heart, right? Like CryptoStream could implement this to be the final flushing. Like, if this API really means I have no more data to send you, like, please do whatever final transformation is necessary in preparation for shutting stuff down.
Okay, so I have to talk in terms of implementation instead of abstract to make sure I understood what you were saying, Levi. You've called write, and now you call whatever, shutdown write, or whatever we rename it to. And that's expected to then be like, oh, I've hit the end of the data, so go finish with final transform and all the padding and the nonsense.
Yeah, basically, like I am writing the end of file mark, right?
But that's not a bidirectional stream.
Today. Yeah, like you can't do anything after that.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Like this really only makes sense on BiDi streams or BIDI or however anybody feels like pronouncing BIDI. And most importantly, it only makes sense when you're really a pipe as opposed to like file stream where you can be in both read and write mode, but it doesn't matter because you're both parts of the universe. It's when read is reading from something other than write is writing to, all on the same stream. Is really the only place that this makes sense, which sort of makes me wonder. I guess with gzip stream, what does it even mean to be in bidirectional mode?
Yeah, I mean,
Like-
I think it's also the question, like, who do we expect to call this? Like, which code would need to be changed in order to call this method that we have, for example? Because that kind of controls to me, like, where this thing should live, right? Because if the consumer always has, I don't know, a network stream in their hands anyway, then it could very well live on some higher level type. It doesn't have to live on the abstraction, right? If it's typically in code that has no idea which stream you're dealing with, then my concern is also that we now ask the entire world to first override this and then also call it when appropriate. But like that seems like a fairly heavy hammer too.
Yeah, like if we added bidirectional stream as an intermediate base type, like again, I know why file stream doesn't need it because it's not really a bidirectional stream. It can be in both read and write simultaneously, but it's not really bidirectional. But is gzip really bidirectional?
No, you construct gzip for one direction, either reading or writing.
Yeah. So why would we want to do this on gzip? I see. The problem is
calling out gzip as
because it wraps.
If you have something that transforms a stream, if you have a wrapping stream, and you don't personally care about shutdown, it makes sense to just forward it to the next stream. And if we have like a BiDi stream or an iBiDi stream or something like that, then it breaks any opportunity for composition. Essentially,
Right.
You can only compose with things that are BiDi.
Well, but I mean that would be true anyway, right? Like gzip stream, either it does special work in its dispose to say it supports if I'm in write mode and I have a bidirectional stream, instead of disposing the stream, I should call shutdown write. Like the way that it would do that is it has to override the shutdown write to forward that call into the stream that it was wrapping. So no matter what, once we add this, there's no free. It's you have to do the work. The question is, do we make you do an is or not?
It's not free, and that's free isn't the goal here. It's really making it so that if you have some sort of filtering stream that is not, it doesn't care about shutdown, but you might want to use that filtering stream on the thing that you do care about shutdown.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm just thinking out loud. If we added a bidirectional stream and we added a write wrapper stream over a bidirectional stream, or even just over stream, like if it's just common to have a write wrapper, then we could make the write wrapper in its dispose say if it's wrapping a bidirectional stream, call shutdown and then don't dispose, I guess, versus calling dispose if it wasn't a bidirectional stream. And then now you have encoded the semantic, and now we just need to say gzip and cryptostream and the in other simply wrapping streams that we have, switch to using that, and now everything's happy.
Well, that's the general problem. Well, it only works for one layer, right? So if you have like a bidirectional stream, and then on the right side you wrap it in a gzip stream, and then on top of that you wrap it on a hashing stream or whatever that you have a side effect for. That doesn't compose anymore, right? So
but the hashing stream will call dispose on the gzip stream, and the gzip stream, so using the write wrapper, it calls dispose, which says I didn't have bidirectional, so it hits the gzip stream, which hits its write wrapper, which says it was bidirectional, so it calls shutdown write, and then doesn't dispose the underlying stream because somebody else's job is to do that because it was bidirectional.
I see. You're basically saying the mechanism to forward is dispose, and then the only part that has to do any work is the one that sits directly on top of the.
Yeah, if you're wrapping, you stop wrap. If you're wrapping in write mode, you stop wrapping stream and
the read side
or the stream, and you always wrap it in a write wrapper, or whatever. Now that may be
Or-
completely asinine, but it
No,
seems.
no, I think it makes sense, but it seems like another way to accomplish the same thing you're talking about would be to have an explicit write wrapper in the sense of like if we have BiDi stream, then there's a method on it called get write only wrapper or something like that that returns a stream that only allows you to write, and when that is disposed, it calls shutdown write on the underlying BiDi stream.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. That I think that is actually a way nicer design. Yeah, I like that.
And so then
So
you wouldn't
what was the
pass the
summary of
network
that?
stream into gzip. You would pass network stream dot get write only stream or something.
Right.
Is that what you were thinking, Jeff?
Yes.
So the thought is that anyone who needs this and is currently like using network stream today, something like network stream today, would now have to keep track of both streams, both a reading stream and a writing stream, and just dispose the writing stream.
No, it's when you're passing it to something doing delegated writes like gzip, you would not give it your full stream. You would give it this pre-wrapped stream, which knows that dispose doesn't dispose. It calls end writes.
Gotcha.
From a composition and kind of cleanness perspective, I like that. There will probably be some objections from folks who are super focused on allocation that we're creating another 24-byte object.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it actually matters. I mean, certainly for network stream, it's already the case that it's not reusable. So you're really just increasing the size of network stream by 24 bytes if you take advantage of that feature. And if we were to ever make it reusable across different sockets, I guess we could make this one too. That seems fine to me.
So the
Yeah,
thought.
I mean, I generally like that more because the problem is really if you add virtuals to stream that you expect people to override, like it's basically a bug farm, right? Because there's always one party in the middle that forgot to override it, and then stuff doesn't compose, and that will probably take forever to get this actually across the finish line. Versus the other one is, yeah, a little bit more heavyweight probably, but at least it works.
So what would this look like in terms of an an implementation? I know reasonably well, like socket HTTP handler. So you've talked about HTTP 1.0 and HTTP 3.0, Corey. How would the implementation change based on this? Would it change at all, or would it just be, yeah, how would it change?
So HTTP 1.0, which we sort of support today, would work better with this. We only technically support HTTP 1.0 if you're not using TLS right now, and if you're only using a network stream. So this would allow us to open that up to more streams. This would also be used in the LLHTTP library, which needs to be able to shut down for all of its HTTP stuff.
Sorry, I think I may have misunderstood the suggestion. Was the proposal to add to network stream or to stream this method? Are we talking about adding a virtual to stream that is as write only? Or are we talking about adding to network stream?
What I heard was adding things specifically on network stream and quick stream and anything else that's bidirectional.
So that's what I heard too. So I wasn't clear what you said. How would this enable us to work with non-network streams?
Right. So our current APIs that take a stream, we would have to make new APIs that take two streams because we would need to be able to shut down the write stream.
Or since we already, so I think what we would do is we have APIs that already work in terms of stream, right? Like connect callback works in terms of stream, which means that we are never doing a shutdown write today when you use an arbitrary stream. What we would do, since we already have those APIs, is we'd do something like if is bidirectional stream, then we can be smarter. And actually do the shutdown right. And if it's not, then we just do what we do today, which is punt and hope. If we were designing new APIs, we might design them to require a BiDi stream. But I don't think we have specific plans for those APIs at this point.
Yeah, I think I was operating under the. I heard someone say you can only write to that stream, not read. But thinking about it, I don't know why we wouldn't just let you read from the BiDi stream from the wrapper.
Oh, I see. So the suggestion is
you could, I guess.
Sorry, was the suggestion then that we introduce a new bidirectional stream class, and you can call as bidirectional stream on network stream to get one of those? Or network stream is a bidirectional stream?
My thinking is we would introduce a base class underneath network stream and friends called bidirectional stream, which exposes this new functionality. I think we can introduce a middle base class without breaking the world.
I see. So, and the purpose then of get write only stream is purely that anyone written in terms of dispose would actually that would be translated into close writes.
Yeah.
There may also be some small value in being able to protect someone from not being able to disallow somebody from doing reads on the stream. Like if you're handing off, I mean, presumably you're handing off to somebody who only needs to write, and if you are disabling them from accidentally calling read and fucking up the state of the stream, that might have some small value.
Right. I think there's another issue somewhere, I think, that was talking about adding stream helper methods and wrappers like stream.as read only, stream.as write only, stream.whatever, in support of scenarios like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. If we added as read only and as write only on stream, then this, I guess, could be an override of that to say that it now gives you one of these write wrappers, which we could also make the write wrapper a public class if we wanted, or if we think it really only makes sense for bidirectional stream for understanding that it's wrapping the right half of a bidirectional stream, then it would be a non-public type that just forwards everything except for dispose. It changes dispose to call close writes instead of dispose.
This might also solve, introducing bidirectional stream as a base class might also solve some other issues we have, or at least help them. And that is, right now, the stream base class assumes you don't know what you're doing, and it serializes all asynchronous operations by default, which causes problems for people that derive from stream, don't override everything they really should, and end up getting serialized behavior even if they're a bidirectional stream. If they were to instead, it still requires work on their part, but if they were to instead derive from bidirectional stream, we could make bidirectional streams methods not do that serialization by default. And it's a minor thing, but it's kind of a nicety.
There's also I kind of like the introducing another class here specifically for bidirectional streams, because it also potentially opens up in the future the ability to add other methods on bidirectional stream that don't really make sense on stream.
Yep.
The one that comes to mind immediately is something like a poll read or poll write.
Right.
Just tell you if the thing is readable or writable at the moment.
So the streams that we have, that we own, seems like network stream, quick stream, system IO pipes, pipe stream, and system IO pipelines.
SSL stream.
Nothing from pipelines would implement this, and then SSL stream. That's the totality of
the pipelines wrapper around stream would probably implement this.
But don't you get different stream? Don't you actually say like create a pipe reader or a pipe writer from stream, or you say give me
Oh,
a
that's true. You
pipe
get
reader.
a stream for each side.
Yeah. If pipelines introduced a bidirectional pipe or a bidirectional whatever it is, maybe we would create something from that. But everything else we have is really intended for one operation at a time, even if you can switch directions. Like file stream, you can read or write, but you would never want to be doing that at the same time.
I mean,
think
if you're open
you
for
would.
shared reading and shared writing, you could write some stuff and then go seek back to the beginning and read.
I mean, it gets, well, yeah, I guess if you did something really special and you said, please don't, you passed the magic number to not buffer. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, things get weird, but
you're still doing position-based reads and writes, right? So you're not doing, it's based off the current seek pointer, right? So you can only read and write at the same place at the same time.
Right.
Didn't we add positional stuff like a week ago?
No, I think it was sent back for review, but it also wasn't on stream. I think it was a separate.
Fair enough.
Type.
Yeah, so just to back up for a second here, I think it's worth making the philosophical point that we kind of have a certain fixed number. There's a couple different types of streams in practice, right? One is the, seekable stream, which is file stream and memory stream, right? It's conceptually random access, even if we don't actually allow random access. And you can read it, you can write it, you can seek it. Then there are the read-only streams and the write-only streams, which were pretty self-explanatory. And then there's this sort of bidirectional stream that corresponds loosely to like a network connection, whether it's actually across a network or just in memory. And it's, and perhaps teasing out, some of the differences in semantics between those different types of streams is goodness.
Yeah, I'm just poking around at the other streams we have, but at a high level, I think I like this direction.
So the change here we would get rid of get write only stream, and this would depend on that other issue that is stream.as write only.
Oh no, I wasn't suggesting we could do that. I don't.
Okay.
I don't know that we need to. I was just highlighting that the desire to potentially get a read-only thing to protect you from being written to, or a write-only thing to protect you from being read from, has been expressed elsewhere.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think we could do that. Fine. I guess this needs to be abstract. No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
The bidirectional stream should be abstract.
Yeah, sorry, I meant the as write only or get write only stream or whatever we want to call it. Because the whole purpose is the bidirectional stream knows that it just needs to create a forwarder back to itself, basically. That
I would think we would start with it not even being virtual,
right?
And we could always make it virtual if we desired,
right? And if we think that we would call the feature on stream as read only and as write only, then we can use the same name here, and then it becomes override unless we decide that one's not virtual on stream, because we can make our own wrappers. But yeah. Okay, so yes, this is
okay.
I mean, what's on screen is obviously what I was thinking, and
if we're going to add get write only stream, do we want to add get read only stream also? I realize that it's really just a convenience at this point. We're not actually doing the delegate to the close write on dispose thing, but it seems like it would look odd if we only added one.
Would just return this?
No, it would return a wrapping stream that actually disallows you from writing on it.
Okay.
Maybe. I mean, that does seem like that's really more the general stream feature, but maybe this is the layer that should do that, and the only places that really care are all bidirectional streams, and that we just do as read only and as write only here.
If we decide that we want that on stream later on, will that work? If we make a virtual on stream and have this suddenly implement that? say we ship this in .NET 6, and in .NET 7 we decide, oh, that should be a virtual on stream, not bidirectional stream.
So
I think that's compatible. You make that one virtual, you make this an override.
Yeah.
I believe that's both source and binary compatible.
The compiler might have issued a call instead of a
It would
call or whatever, but
wouldn't it only do that for within the same assembly?
I don't know. Like, there's this whole debate we have with the language team of whether adding the word virtual in a later release is breaking or non-breaking, and we think it's not.
Today,
and they think, oh my god, why would you do that?
99% of the cases, even if you're non-virtual, the compiler will still emit a call vert.
Yeah.
But there's like 1% of certain situations where it doesn't that have crept in, and there's a debate about whether that's valid.
Gotcha.
I think the one that I can remember, I think for a null, what's it called when you have the Elvis operator, question mark dot blah, null
coalescing.
Null coalescing invoke, yeah. I think there we may, because the original reason for introducing call vert was to handle null, and I think there, because the compiler can then prove that it's non-null, because it admits the check, it might emit a call instead of a call vert. We have to double check.
Yeah, I do know that was the reason, is that the call vert IL instruction says the null check's built in and the call one does not. Right. And they're like, well, we can skip all the compiler emitted null checks and let the runtime deal with it from the IL. And then they're like, well, we already did the null check. Let's call the faster thing if it's a non-virtual function. And that we had a debate, and it ended the way that many debates do, of we stopped talking about it, and what they had done shipped, and what we felt is still what we feel, and they just don't agree anymore. Anyway, so, I mean, if we combine the thing and we say it only makes sense to do as read-only and as write-only on the bidirectional streams, and we can go ahead and merge the two requests here.
So I heard that there was a opportunity to use as read-only and as write-only as an optimization on streams that are not necessarily bidirectional.
Optimizing how? Like, if they're not conceptually bidirectional, then, I mean, yes, you could say, I want a file stream, I don't care if it's in both read and write mode, I want writes to not happen, but that feels rare. So the seekable dual operation streams, aka file stream, would be the only one that I can think of that would want this that's not BiDi. I mean, we could believe it belongs on stream instead of here, but it feels weird. And I think we've convinced ourselves that we can move these down later, because moving a method to a base class is handled by the runtime, and even if it was doing call instead of call vert, it will call the override slot, which should just work. So I think everything would just work if we moved this and then overrode it up here.
Okay, who should we double check about that with?
I'll say Jan, but there is probably someone who gets asked fewer questions that could also answer it authoritatively.
Sorry, about the changing, about the virtualness?
If the compiler is emitting call instead of call vert, and we later move these, in a later release, we move as read-only and as write-only onto stream as virtual, will the combination of the runtime handling methods moving down and there being a new override slot that has the same spot as the call instead of the call vert mean that we ended up exactly in the same override? We probably wouldn't forward to a later override because they called call instead of call vert, but as long as none of the bidirectional streams re-override as read-only or as write-only, you wouldn't have a breaking change from that version to the next there.
We can check it, but as Levi points out, we also have other options available to us. We could add leave this non-virtual and add a virtual create write-only or create read-only protected member on the base class, and then change, this to delegate to that or something.
Fair enough. Yeah, so I think we've convinced ourselves we could move this to stream in the future if we wanted to. The as read only and as write only. But that if we want to start with it scoped to this new bidirectional stream middle layer, we can, and we can add the. Yes, Jeremy is a weird person.
Another concern that was raised that we wanted some input on is close writes, previously shutdown writes, shutdown write. I think we wanted to make sure that no one would confuse like the value task in close writes async as indicating that the other side has acknowledged all of your data.
I mean, we already have that. We already have that with write today, right? I mean, write async doesn't guarantee the other side has received it.
Yeah, so I feel like we're still consistent with how stream works, but it's just a thought if there's some clarification we can make there.
We have that on, actually, we already have that on WebSocket as well. Like WebSocket provides close, I think they're named the exact same thing, like, or not close writes, but it's called close. There's a
it's
one
like
directional
send close or something, yeah.
Yeah, there's a one directional close on WebSocket, and it doesn't guarantee that the other side has received the packets.
Yeah, close async. Yep.
Okay. I'm happy with this as it is on the screen.
Oh, sorry, it has both close async and close output async.
I'm fine with the APIs defined. I do want to talk about naming a little bit. I feel a little queasy about using the term close for the reason that Stephen just brought up, which is that close itself implies that this thing is done and you're, I don't know. I guess I lean a little bit towards something that doesn't associate with the term close, which is strongly associated with dispose and yeah, I mean, we can come up with terrible names. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, a couple alternatives are complete writes, right end of stream. I don't think right end of stream is terrible. It's wordy, but it's explicit.
Well, but again, that sounds like you're doing a solid verb of writing the end of the stream, and you may be doing something complicated. Like, there may not actually be any writes involved. I can't think of one that we have right now that would be true, but the
some change of states involved. It depends on what you mean by writes. Like, there may not be writes that actually involved. There may not be any data associated with it in the sense of like causing actual bits to be read on the other side. But there's certainly something that's going in. If you want to think about it as in terms of on the wire, there's certainly something that's going on the wire as a result of this.
I think I understand where Jeremy's coming from. Currently, when you call write, it creates bytes on the other side. So having something else called write that doesn't result in bytes on the other side might be confusing, especially as we have various other classes that have tons of write overloads, and they kind of are all expected to write bytes to the stream.
Yeah. On the other hand, let me put it this way: if I'm the peer and I'm blocked, and I've issued a read call and I'm blocked waiting for data, if I, as the writer of the data, call write and send actual bits, that read will complete with those bits. If I call close writes, then that read will complete with a 0-byte read, with bytes read equals 0.
yes.
So in that sense, they are both, writes.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem with, I guess, yeah, the problem with complete as the verb to me is that sort of sounds like flush and block. Like, don't move to the next line of code until we've gotten all of the pending buffered writes confirmed as written. And what we're really saying is the stream promises it won't write anything else and now gets to deal with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can also, like, if we changed it from, write or writes to writing and we called it complete writing, then maybe, or close writing, or, because what we're really indicating is you can't call write anymore. Whatever the stream does with that information is up to the stream. But that's really all the caller is signaling is I'm done writing.
No, but the caller is also signaling I want my peer to be notified that I'm done writing.
Right. Which, yeah, I mean, there will at least be a state change, because something like a pipe, you would close your half of the pipe, and then they'd get the yeah, you're done now because we hit EOF.
Yeah.
But you didn't necessarily write anything, which is why write being the verb feels weird. And it goes back to the beginning when I thought that this was indicating go issue all your shutdown verbiage, when what it's from the API purpose, all it's really signaling is I promise I won't, or not only do I promise I won't write after this, writes after this will probably throw.
So it sounds like the behavior you want, especially if the default implementation is basically to call flush, assuming that this is virtual instead of abstract, then one of the things that I had previously mentioned is final flush, which is like, by the way, this is, please flush whatever data you have, and there's going to be no more data after this. Do with that information what you.
But flushing isn't guaranteed here.
So the behavior of this, I think it would imply a flush.
Fair enough.
So you could just call this instead of flush.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But again, like
I
it's
would assume
called,
this would have a flush inside of it.
I guess flush makes no sense on reads, so final flush is not ambiguous for your state.
Yeah, I'm also biased because that's what we called it way back on like the old framework ASP.NET. We had an API called like final flush or something like that, which basically indicated I am not going to send you any more data whatsoever. If I do, like the write method will throw an exception.
All right. I think we're good with those parts. So we really just need to name this one thing.
I think I prefer either complete writes or close writes. Complete only because that's the terminology that Pipelines uses.
It's also the terminology that Channels uses. When you have like a channel writer, when you want to indicate that you're done writing to it, you call complete, I believe.
Yeah. I'm fine with complete.
Okay.
I have another question on another aspect of this when we're done with naming.
I guess the notion that Corey had said of this does strongly imply a flush, seems complete. The only problem that I have with complete is that it implied flush, and then the question of whether this is a blocking operation or a non-blocking operation is, I guess, left to the implementation. But
yeah, but even flush doesn't guarantee that the peer has seen the data.
But it blocks until, if for network stream, it blocks until it's all been sent out of the NIC, right?
No, it blocks
until the OS takes it.
Yeah, it's in the kernel buffer. It may or may not reach the other side.
And even then, for any stream in general, the built-in implementation of stream.flush async just guarantees that you've queued a work item to the thread pool.
Okay.
Yeah, network stream is a non-flushing stream. We're still debating whether quick is a flushing stream or not. But even if quick requires flush, then what that would mean is similar to what it means on like an HTTP request stream, request body stream, which is that the data has been handed off to the kernel, or not even handed off to the kernel, but the data has been queued for sending, and there's no further action required by you in order to guarantee that it will be sent at some point, barring catastrophic failure.
Yeah, so is there a guarantee in any of these operations that the kernel pushes it to the NIC, and that the NIC has pushed it to the wire, and in the case of TCP, an ACK has been received before the process terminates?
No.
No.
So there's literally nothing you can write, which is as soon as this has been successfully pushed to the peer, terminate my process?
There's that's a great question. In general, there is no way for you to know whether you are writing data or writing end of stream or there. Well, those are the options. But whether you're doing whichever those you're doing, there's no way for you to become notified that the peer has received and acknowledged that data other than something at the application level, right? In other words, meaning that they explicitly send you something back the other way.
So nothing for a TCP session will block on the ACK of the packet.
Now there is
there is linger depending on what OS you're on.
There is a thing called linger that no one ever uses. That basically says when you close the socket, don't complete the close of it immediately. Linger until you get the final ACK, and if you don't get it after a certain amount of time, then you should basically abort and kill and send a reset on the wire. No one actually ever uses this because, well, first of all, it's a pain in the ass to use. Second of all, it doesn't actually work asynchronously, and so that's really bad. Third of all, in practice, protocols, including HTTP, are written so that they don't require protocols that are built on top of TCP don't depend on receiving the FIN from the peer. They have app level acknowledgments that allow them to know whether the operation they were trying to complete was completed or not.
Okay.
Now, Quick is a little different, and in Quick, first of all, one of the differences is that all the protocol handling happens in user mode, as opposed to kernel mode, which has a couple implications. One of which is we don't want you to shut down your process until all the teardown of the connection state the quick connection state has completed. Whereas the kernel takes care of that for you for TCP, it doesn't. Now that has to be taken care of in user mode. Additionally, Quick seems to rely more on, or seems to intend for folks to be able to reliably get notifications that the stream has completed in part perhaps because of this exact problem I'm talking about, which is that you need to know when that happens in order to make sure you don't tear down your user mode state. And so as part of Quick Stream, you will be able to, well, let me put it this way. Dispose will not complete until all of the acts have happened on both sides and all the state can be torn down. So that means that if you want to handle any errors that come from, you can't wait on any particular acts. You can't say, tell me when the peer has act this many bytes, but you can wait on effectively the entire stream being successfully processed and gracefully closed down. And you can be notified of errors during that process by throwing from dispose async.
Right. But if it has a flush, you're not going to guarantee that the flush has done that, only the dispose.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. All the flush will guarantee really is that it has been handed off to whoever is responsible to. All the flush, let me even back up. If you don't call flush, this is assuming we require flush in QuickStream, but if you don't call flush, then the data may not be sent. It may be sent, but it may not be sent.
Right.
If you call flush, then we guarantee that the data will be sent eventually, modulo the entire thing blowing up, in which case you'll be notified about that in a different way.
Fair enough. Okay. So we basically have these imply a write when needed by the protocol and a flush when appropriate. And again, in the case of like a pipe, they'll simply just call. I mean, they would call flush if they had pending data, I guess, and then they just call close on the pipe on the right half,
Yes.
and then everything else works. So yeah, we're really down to yeah. Are we happy enough with complete rights that no one wants to object?
I think it's fine. I do have a question on some other things.
Okay.
I had one other naming issue, which is, do we like bidirectional stream? I will say file streams are bidirectional streams too. So I'm not sure that's the right term, but
yeah. An alternative is duplex.
That may make more sense because that's when you have the read channel and the write channel.
another alternative is connected stream.
Yeah, I can't really think of times you would use this if you weren't connected to a peer. So
I mean, it is if you had a duplex memory stream concept like that, you could use that for just a buffer between, or a dynamic buffer between two components. Like it's still duplex. The notions here make sense. Really, you should be using whichever is right of channels or pipelines for that. But
there's still a notion of it. You can argue that that's still notionally a connected stream, right? Like we actually have something like that checked in to for testing purposes, and we call it connected stream, even though it's only in memory.
Fair enough. I think that bidirectional or duplex is better than connected because we're describing more why the type exists instead of what state we assume you're in when you're using it. But I can see connected being a reasonable name. Duplex is, I think, my current favorite, but
yeah, that's fair. I think
whoever yells the loudest.
Connected stream may not be the best.
I'm fine with duplex.
I think duplex is better than bidirectional.
This actually works because pipelines has iduplex pipe. So
yeah, that's
continuing on with the worded.
Okay.
I guess we also want to add this to SSL stream, and do we need API review approval to add it on any other streams we find?
I think we just do that as part of a PR.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I do have some questions about behavior and a few things. So let's say I have a network stream, and I give someone as read only, and I give someone else as write only, and they both close or dispose their streams. Is that 100% equivalent in all resource management and everything else to calling network stream.dispose?
I guess the question with the so with the as read only, what is the dispose supposed to forward to? Or does it just close the local reader? In which case the parent stream doesn't know that it got disposed.
That's a good point.
Because the write only is easy. We call complete writes. You created 12 of them. One of them called complete writes. Or sorry, one of them got disposed. We called complete writes. You're dead. You're done.
I feel like we probably need to get rid of, well, either we need to get rid of as read only, or we add complete reads, and we don't really know what that does in a variety of places. And then my question still stands, I think. Presumably, just in a different form of it. Presumably, like if I give someone as write only, I still need to eventually call dispose on my stream.
Yes.
Yeah.
And do I know when I can do that?
Presumably, it's your job to make sure whatever you pass the write only stream to is finished.
And if it's not, it'll just get object disposed exceptions when it writes back into the duplex stream.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the opposite of you handing off as write only, dropping your reference, and then there's the leak.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you just drop the reference, then now the as write only stream will still have a reference back to the duplex stream, so it's not going to get garbage collected or finalized.
No, that's not what I mean.
But
so I do all the reading I care about, and then Jeremy, I give you as write only, and I drop my reference. Now you do all your writing, and you call dispose, but my stream hasn't actually been disposed yet.
Right. So now the native resource gets queued for finalization.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of it in terms of the network stream or SSL stream or etc., right? You have, using SSL stream, do some stuff. Oh, I'm writing compressed data using a gzip stream of stream.asWriteOnly. And now I've given it all of my writing and I'm done. Because assuming gzip stream does cascaded dispose, then once that you close that gzip stream, the write channel's done. And now you still own the read half, but when you close it, you're done. So it makes sense in my head. I can also see where there's some room for more finalization than we would really like.
Yeah, it seems like this kind of prevents the whole owns stream composition fun that we have today. It forces ownership to be managed by the caller.
Jeremy, you still have as read only there. What does as read only do?
Got copied as I moved things into the browser. Right. Yeah, because while we know that it makes sense for don't give someone access, like give a stream that has can write is false and the write methods don't function. We did have I closed the read half and I closed the write half, but I didn't close the stream, and we don't know what that means.
Right. The alternative is we add as read only complete reads and complete reads async.
It's not fully clear what we do with complete reads in Quick and elsewhere like SSL stream. I'd prefer not to add those.
Right. So I think my understanding of Steve's comment is if we want to add as read only, we have to add probably virtual complete reads, virtual in that it generally does nothing. And if we don't want to add complete reads yet, then we don't add as read only. So I like less is more, even though it violates symmetry.
Okay. I look forward to the PR.
All right. Do we agree that duplex stream is a general I/O and not net?
Yeah, this is right.
Okay.
Yep.
I would agree with that.
One other issue that occurred to me as we were talking about that is a lot of wrapping streams have a concept of whether they own the inner stream and therefore should dispose it when they are disposed. Do we need that on as write only?
I mean, the
Or is it
only
just implied?
reason you really want it is you want disposed to call complete writes, right?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about two. That's the primary reason. That's the because we're adding it because we want to enable the scenario where you can have where complete writes will be called for you. There was another. It was also brought up that some people just want a write only or read only wrapper stream in general, and in that case, I think you'd want to be able to control whether you dispose the inner stream or not. But maybe we're just saying that scenario is scoped out here, and we'll deal with it later if we deal with it.
Yeah, that's sort of how I feel. Like you can achieve the solution by everyone's most favorite non-cascade dispose stream. that probably everyone has written at one point or another in their .NET lifetime. But yeah, I mean, we could add the Boolean here of don't complete write on dispose, but that feels weird. And if you had true on that, then you probably also wanted the as read only that we just cut.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
So I think we can add the Boolean later when we figure out what as read only means.
Also, I don't know if the Boolean would apply to the duplex stream. If you're using as write only on a duplex stream, you want complete writes. It sounds like the thing the other whoever wanted was just a general read write wrapper over a stream, which probably would not be appropriate to have their stream be duplex stream in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, they want it for any stream.
Right, because if you wanted the really it's, right now we're saying getting the write-only scoped means dispose calls complete writes. Because if you're doing a bunch of complicated things like, oh, I'm going to write a content marker that now I'm writing some gzip stuff, and then write some gzip stuff, and then end the content marker or whatever. Like, you would just open the gzip stream with your stream instead of with the as write only. And if we think that's complicated and now we want to rename as write only to be like completable writing stream, then like we can do that. If we feel that as, because it's not really as, which I think is why I started with get write only stream, because disposing the thing that is returned from this is different than disposing us and has a different context of state management.
That's a good point. We have like as enumerable, that sort of thing, where people are expecting it to be, the same object just casted. Would this be confusing for people to see as?
Generally, you use the to prefix when you're creating a new object with a standalone lifetime, but this doesn't have a standalone lifetime.
Right.
Right, but its lifetime changes state on this yeah.
I mean, I guess
There's
you are
creating it as
essentially the same stream, just not the same instance.
Right.
So I guess as makes sense.
Well, yeah, I think so. Yeah, Levi brought up our high-level heuristic of as versus to is the GC was not involved, and to is the GC is involved. So like array.asSpan makes a new thing, but it makes a struct, so it didn't allocate anything. So as is the GC didn't care. So this is really to write only. But
can we just use get? Can we say get write only?
Yeah, get and create to me sound fun.
I feel like it makes sense to say, yeah, there we go.
as had an implicit noun, get lost one.
I'm happy with this.
Ship it.
Cool.
So lesson learned, don't let Corey sneak in a thing. It only took us an hour and a half. No, not quite an hour and a half, an hour 15 minutes.
All right. API approved as everything changed.
Thanks, folks. Have a conflict. See ya.
See ya.
I gotta run too. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
So
Apparently
this
you're
will-
scoped, but
This this will likely take up the next 45 minutes. I know there were some other things that people wanted that had been in email your agenda. How do you want to handle that?
Yeah. So we can do one or two things. We can either just declare bankruptcy and say we will not finish interpolated strings anyway because we only have 45 minutes left, and actually just try to get the other quick things approved. Or we can just say, screw it, we just go with interpolated strings. It kind of depends on how strongly you feel about this, Stephen.
I would like to get the support for this merged by the end of next week. So if you want to punt this, we can do it first thing on Tuesday. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, then let's do that, because then Fed is also back. Maybe that's better anyway. And we should still have the context because we don't forget quite that quickly.
Just I see folks like
okay?
Peter. Yeah, that's fine. I see people like Peter on the call, so I want to make sure we get to,
Yeah.
those things.
So then I forgot which order there was. I think we had the interrupt one first, and then we had, I think, Mahoney's feature, if I remember correctly.
Okay. The itinerary I saw was a seal internal and private type analyzer, Mahoney's GC usage, then call convention, then sigterm. But
okay, then let's do that.
we can do whatever order. I think Steve's proposal is easy. We'll just say yes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Then let's do that in that order.
So this is just for an analyzer. I marked it as blocking because we've had some other folks express interest in actually writing it soon, and so I wanted to get it approved before they spent any time on it. Our public API guidelines, to my dismay, say don't seal by default, but there are many good reasons to do so. And so for internal private stuff, I would like people to be able to turn on an analyzer that says, hey, you'll get free perf if you just seal this thing. Yeah, so that's what it is. So basically an analyzer that we can make it configurable. So we can make it configurable based on visibility, but by default, it would be if you have an internal or private type and no one is deriving from it in the assembly, then, and maybe some other rules we choose to throw in, then suggest that it be sealed, and a fixer that would do so.
And that's handling methods and types, or just types?
Just types. I mean, we could choose to do methods individually, but that's a bigger ball of wax, I think, and is also less bang for the buck.
I would agree with that.
Yep.
And probably also way more noisy. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, in all my projects, there's seal types by default, and I'm a very happy person to do that.
Right. I mean, if we super duper absolutely care, this last point only applies to actually internal types. If it's a private type, IVT shouldn't shut off the thing. But
cool. Yeah. I mean,
we can say once IVT's on, we just turn the thing off because you're insane, so we don't care.
Yeah, this was just to say, like, I think the 99% case is what I care about, and if we can make the rule better for the 1%, I'm happy. That's great too.
If this is configurable, can I still turn it on for things that have IVT? Because, like, say I just use it for unit tests.
I mean, we could choose as part of the design, I think, implementation to make it as configurable as we want. Typically, configuration that's done is based on visibility. I don't know what kind of arbitrary configuration we support, but we could certainly say, like, I care about IVT or I don't, defaulting to yes, and then turn it off.
Okay. I mean, the reason I bring it up is the most common case to use that is people write unit tests.
Yeah.
And it's like, to completely, disable this just because I'm writing unit tests doesn't seem
right.
Yeah, I mean, once it's there, more config knobs are fine. It's just the question is, do we think the analyzer's useful? And we just say
if the analyzer is opt-in, I think it's okay to say, regardless whether you have IVTs or not, we just warn. And then if you have IVTs and then your code stops compiling, you just pragma suppress the one type that you need to have extensible, right? Because it's probably also somewhat rare in IVT cases to actually inherit from types.
I'm fine with that as well.
That seems like a reasonable trade-off, because it's easier to configure this way, right? The other thing is now you have to find out, like, what you have to do to turn it on for IVTs, and it just seems, if the old analyzer is opt-in, that's your one switch, and then the other one is just normal suppression.
Yeah, I mean, my proposal was that by default, this is at best info and probably hidden by default, which just means it shows up only if you put your cursor on the relevant line, and then it shows up as a little light bulb. So.
Yep, that works for me.
All right. I feel like I said Mayoni next.
So take out the internals visible to part in that last one.
Yeah, and we can
That's
do
what we
it
just agreed upon, right?
Yeah, somebody can edit the
Right
issue
click.
after me.
Okay.
I guess undo close tab. Undo close tab.
Yep.
All right. Add an
All right.
API to reduce GC memory usage. 509er02.
So since Peter's on the call, Peter, do you want to talk to it?
Peter, you're muted.
Sorry. This feature request came from the Exchange team. Their situation is they have like 50 managed processes on any one box. And what made things hard to manage for them is that some processes had much larger heaps than were actually required. And so they would like a knob to tell the GC to conserve memory to some extent. And when Mauni and I talked, the idea was to introduce a dial that would basically tell the GC, try this hard to conserve memory. And the knob we came up with basically is a knob that tells GC, how much memory should be useful memory as opposed to fragmentation. And so we propose to introduce an API that lets the user program adjust this at runtime, because the idea is this may change depending on what kind of situation the app is in. There may be apps where at some points you really want to handle, say, net traffic as efficiently as possible. There may be other times where it's more important to conserve memory and so on. So that's why it's a setting. I think what we can certainly discuss is the naming, whether the naming is good. And I think it's probably useful to have a read-write property, because a static read-write property, because that also enables code to save and restore a setting and change it for some intermediate activity where, say, we don't care about memory, we just want to get things done as quickly as possible. So that's sort of a summary of why we want this feature.
So I have a couple just initial thoughts and comments and questions. One is there's already the GC settings class, and that has read-write properties for various modes. I'm curious why this isn't something there instead. Go ahead.
Yeah, right. So this, as the name suggests, is optimization. So this is a way for the user to express to us basically their desire for how they want the memory usage to be optimized. So eventually we want to add the other two aspects as well. So generally there's three aspects when you talk about memory usage optimization goals, right? There's obviously the heap size, there's the throughput, if you want to optimize for throughput or not, there's pause time. So as a first step that by the way, we've already tried this with the change on .NET Framework. So we wanted to provide the memory dial as an optimization goal. So it's a little different idea from the latency mode.
I guess my not being steeped in the innards of the GC, from a user perspective, this seems like another setting for the GC, so I'm just wondering why we wouldn't put it on GC settings.
Yeah, GC settings dot memory optimization goal.
For example.
Well, it's an alternative designs. If you could scroll up.
I'm at the top.
I think it means
presumably.
Scroll down, sorry. so that would be an alternative. I think, as Mauni explained, we want to have more than this one eventually. So it may make sense to make a separate class, but we could also put it under GC settings. It just means the name has to be somewhat different. I put optimize memory for now, but we may be able to come up with a better name.
Well, let me ask this question. You talk about adding 2 more knobs in the future. What is the expected interaction between those knobs? So like if we had this dedicated GC goal class, does that in any way impact the relationship between, like I set GC optimization goal to dot memory to 6, and then we add a pause time overload. Does that, or a method, does that change the interpretation of the memory one in any way, or?
Yeah,
it probably would have to. Sorry, go ahead, Moni.
Yeah, they definitely would interact with each other. So what we would do, in internally is that we just calculate a weight based on what you specify for each value. Then we do the best we can to achieve that. So let's say if you say I want to optimize for everything, then that's, we're just saying like, then we'll just optimize equal amounts for each goal, right? But if you say like, I either don't specify the other 2 goals, I only specify the memory one, then GC would try to optimize just to satisfy your memory goal.
Right. So really, you're giving 3 sliders, and you're telling people how they want those sliders relative to each other.
Yeah. And by the way, the latency modes, the current settings that we expose, I think in the long run, we probably want to not obsolete them, but kind of phase them out in the background, because we really want the user to not have to care so intimately about the GC behavior. Like for example, like sustained low latency, the user has to understand like, oh, I don't want GC to be doing these blocking GCs often. I want it to be doing background GCs often. We actually don't want the users to need to have that kind of knowledge. But instead, you just say like, I want to optimize for pause time, and then GC will just do its best to optimize for that.
So
Aaron looks to have his hand up.
Go ahead, Aaron.
You're muted, Aaron.
Oh, too many buttons. Sorry, thanks. I think the question, I see the example up here where it seems like this is something that we would expect users to on the fly be able to change. That seems like a very dangerous operation. Like, because basically what I'm saying, from what I'm reading here, the user sets the goal to 0, and that reduces pause times. And so the assumption is it was doing more work in this case. And so as soon as they reset it, then they could go in the opposite direction. So instead of saying 0, let's say they put 9 there, and then they revert it to a lower number. Wouldn't, as soon as they revert it, the GC could have a spike of work to do? And then you could accidentally say, oh, well, why do I have the spike? It's like, well, you had the spike because you told us to be less aggressive, and now you want us to be back to normal, and now I see the spike. I guess like changing it on the fly seems odd to me. Is that?
Well, I think if you went from 9 to 0, you would say run the GC all the time, and so we don't grow our working set. And then when you revert it back to 0, now you're saying be lax and do what you want. It's when you go 7 to 0 back to 7 that it goes, oh crap, I have too much lax memory. I need to run a full GC now. I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
We don't really, I wouldn't expect the user to change this all the time. I would expect them to really just change it when they switch phases, meaning that, let's say I'm on my startup path, and now I know I'm going to go into steady path. So I kind of have different expectation for memory usage.
Yeah.
Or
my concern with the usage example here, which is similar to Aaron's, but I'll say, if we really think that we want a save restore pattern, like this is a global static, it sounds like we need some kind of guarantee of non-race conditions, because if I snap what the state was in my parallel operation right as someone sets optimization goal memory to lax, then I'm going to end up pushing it back into the lax state if we get offset in our state. Like, we can say, yes, this only makes sense for main to mess with, but it looks here like we think it's I'm doing a kind of operation that, fine, you're allowed to grow the working set a little bit more so that I don't pause in the middle of this. But it feels, really like this is main one and done, or main like startup and then steady state, and that we don't really think that this usage example is representative of how we want people to use it. And if we do think it's representative, I think we need completely different API.
Well, certainly you wouldn't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to mess with it in their little methods, right? This is really an app-wide setting, and it only makes sense to use it in this way if the app changes behavior. Say it goes quiescent, it doesn't do any work, then you want to shrink your working set probably. What specifically would you object to? I mean, in the example, is it the try finally, or?
Well, it's the fact that it's using save restore. So if Exchange, decided to use this while handling, I don't know, a complicated mailbox move operation or something,
right.
But then they get two of those that load in parallel. The second one could hit the first it could hit this line of save the setting while the other one is already pushed go into 0.
Right.
And now instead of restoring it back to 7 like it should have done, it accidentally restores it to lax for the rest of time, because now nobody's ever going to set it back to 7. And so
right.
it's
By the way, this is how the current latency modes work. There's no synchronization. You just get it and set.
Right. I just feel that the example here suggests the notion that you would want to do a temporary change, and I don't know that that's true with the GC mode.
Yeah, you can do that with the GC mode.
But do we think people do?
Yeah, I do think people do. Like VS people do with the latency modes, but when they detect that the user starts being active, they would set it to one mode and then would restore to the previous mode if they detect the user goes on, inactive.
Okay, but again, that's more an app state, and they probably don't care what mode they were in before. They're just saying, I seem to have gone idle, go into this other mode. Not remember what I'm doing, remember what I decided, do some work in this other mode, and then pop back to what I was doing. Like the push pop is where I really feel that we then, if we think that's going to be common and operation scoped or thread scoped or something, then we want something more complicated. If we think it's really the app state changes and that people are going to use it as the app state changes, then this is fine. But the notion here that you would do a save, try, finally, restore is non-representative, I think.
Yes, the example was just to motivate a read-write property, which I still think is useful, but we can of course discuss whether we really want that. But it was also modeled after the other properties on GC settings, which are also read-write.
I think that the GC settings in general are kind of low-level-ish. Your average user won't be using them. Power users and power libraries will. And so I think it's fine that power users and power libraries have to explicitly think about synchronization and how it may interact if another library, for example, tries to do or modify the settings, because it's not like a core scenario that every app's going to do. It's going to be people like Unity or Exchange, where they are writing very specific and targeted scenarios that they'll even think of touching these things.
Yeah, mine really is, if the sample here suggests to me that we think that this is a scoped operation like logging is, and if we think it's really macro, I have no problem with it being get set. My point is, if this example represents how we think people should use it, I think we have the wrong API. That's,
no, I don't think
that's all.
that's the way people should use it. I think the more common scenario is going to be where, the app state changes and the app just sets the mode to a different one. I think that's going to be more typical. Say the app goes idle or the app goes active, has to handle some spike. That's when you would change that memory goal.
Yeah, and that seems totally fine to me. And having it read so that someone can, throw it in logs every now and then is totally sensible.
Okay.
Yeah, really, it was down to if example 2 is how we wanted people to use it, then I think we need something different. And I think I've said that, so I'll stop saying it again.
Levi has his hand up, and then I've got a question as well after that.
I think actually Aaron and Jeremy asked one of the questions I wanted to ask about race conditions. I guess the other question I had was in the issue they had talked about having an enum for this instead of just a regular int. Would that allow us to set something like lax to have a 0 value for the enum and most aggressive to have like int.max value? And that way, if we ever wanted to add stuff in the future, we just add intermediate values, or you could set your own. Like, what is the range on this thing? Like, that's not clear to me from looking at the API.
Okay. The idea is that 0 would give you the default behavior that we have today. Just, whatever GC does today, that's what you would get with 0. Then there are values 1 through 9 that are increasingly aggressive about optimizing memory. And there's an internal correspondence between the GC's internal goals and what this value is, but we are not going to advertise that.
So 0 is the default, 1 is the least aggressive, and 9 is the most aggressive.
Exactly.
Is 1 more aggressive than 0?
We don't tell.
Okay. So 0 is do whatever you think is best, and 1 is I would like to express an opinion, and that opinion is memory is cheap.
Yes. Now, just to let you know what it actually is, for server GC, 1 is more aggressive than 0, but for workstation GC, it's the other way around.
Sure. I think this could actually benefit from an enum then, because then we could, instead of making people memorize magic numbers, like is one less or more aggressive than 9, for instance? Like, is this a measure of aggression or a measure of relaxation? An enum being able to explicitly say default, least aggressive, most aggressive would help.
I think having multiple values, I mean more than say 3, is good, because in some cases you really want to be more precise than what you get with 3 levels or so, and beyond 3 levels the naming gets confusing, I think. Then you have like medium low or things like that.
I mean, we can do
the same thing for compression though.
Well, compression, we have like, we don't provide a whole lot of choice. It's like optimize, optimal size, optimal throughput, sort of thing. I was going to suggest, I wonder, there are other places, and I think maybe even some with GC, where we use a double, like 0 to 1. And then it could be like a nullable double to say, is this set or not?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of going to suggest as well for my question, which was like, what happens if a user passes in more than 10 or a negative value? And in particular, if like, if 0 is default and 0 to 1 and 0 isn't strictly speaking lower than 1, I would almost think that if we were to do an int, then 0 through 10 being ordered least to most and -1 being default would make more sense, because then you have something where -1 just means default. It doesn't strictly compare to the other values. And if we had if we did double, then nan holding that spot makes sense as well, I think.
Yeah, and I mean the GC can certainly internally track its state as these 0 through 9 integers, and we just have the API express it and normalize it to a nullable double or whatever. But doing something like a 0 to 1 double lets you decide that 10 wasn't enough settings, you really wanted 100, and, well, ta-da, you said 90%, so that's what you get.
I don't think it's practical to make it that fine-grained, but because the reason why we have it as integer is because we think like, it's kind of a percentage, and 1 through 9 kind of corresponds to 10%, 90%. That's fine-grained enough, but if the user really wants to be that, like, no, I don't want 90%, I want 92%. First of all, like as Peter mentioned, we don't actually tell people like how we implement these internally. It's only up to the GC to decide. And in the future, when we can do a better job, we'll do a better job just automatically, right? So having it as a 0 to 1 and double, I don't know, like feels to me is a little, I'm not sure what it would achieve. But
I think that what it achieves is, I can't think of any other place where we use integers 1 through 9 to represent percentages, but there are plenty of places we use doubles 0 to 1 to represent percentages.
Can you give an example?
Sure. I'm 99% sure we even have one in GC world. GC.
I'm not aware.
So on what is GC GC memory info dot pause time percentage?
Oh, right, but that's a percentage that we give, not a percentage that you set.
Sure.
To me, that's very different because it's a percentage.
No, but it shows up. It shows up in a public API as a double.
Right, it's a percentage that we give because we can calculate this very precisely, right? That's, if we tell you it's, 0.23, it is 0.23. But when you set something, if you tell us, no, I don't want 0.23, I want 0.21, you're probably not going to see any difference whatsoever.
Right. That's fine. It's a question of the data types that we expose and how people understand their meanings. I can't think of any place where we expose an integer and people know that some portion of that integer represents a percentage range.
Yeah, because the gzip compression level, while gzip internally has a number which I think is 1 through 9, we expose optimal, fastest, no compression, and smallest size, and they're just words. Like they're not fastest being 1 is greater than 0 in any means. It's and 1 no compression is bigger than fastest. Does that mean anything? No, they're just words. If we want an enum, having default least aggressive 2 up through aggressive 8 followed by most aggressive, which we would probably just make max end, seems okay. But it also says these are your options instead of, oh, it's an int, but don't give me a number that's 10 or bigger, because that feels, I can't think of places that we have that, like 1 through or 0 through 9 being a valid range, unless it's tied to a length setting next to it. But
maybe a good comparison is slider controls and WPF and WinForms. Those all use double. And most of the time, you don't care if it's like 0.2135 versus 0.2235. Most of the time, you generally have 0.1, 0.2, 0.3. And if you set it to one of the intermediates, then the UI rounds it to the closest actual value.
Yeah.
There are, of course, maybe the concerns that Mayoni and Peter have raised on if a user does set 0.21, do they actually expect that to behave differently? But I think docs could cover that.
I mean, if they set it to 0.21 and in 2021, that means it's what would have been 2 from this proposal, and that or unless it's 3, and then in 2027, that means it's slightly more than 2 and slightly less than 3. Like, that's totally fine. They're the ones who gave a complex decimal.
From what I've heard, there's no necessary guarantee, even if it was an integer, that someone set it to 1 versus 2 would be able to see a difference.
Right. It's just that 9 levels seemed like the limit where we can say there's likely to be a difference that is perceptible for an app. More resolution seems useless, and it would tempt the user to think that something will happen if he tweaks it just a little bit. So that was my concern, to stay with those 9 levels.
So to tell you a bit about our experiments with Exchange. Exchange actually did like 7 better than 5. Oh, that's what they're using now.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah. I mean, if we want, again, thinking of an enum, if we just want words, you have least, lightly, moderate, strong, and maximum, right?
So if we are very against having these integers, I would definitely vote for having double then instead of enums. Because I feel like enums just kind of causes for future trouble. Like, what if I want to add another enum, then I have to go add another enum and explain that to the user.
I mean, I guess my question is, what's wrong with an int-based level? Like, I think we can also say in version 1 we support 5 levels, and then eventually we had 6 or 7 levels, and then just more is more.
Well,
right?
That's actually the problem, right? Is if 5 is documented as be as aggressive as you possibly can and keep your working set from ever potentially growing at all, like if we change it to, sorry, we were kidding, 50 is now that maximum, that feels really bad, and the app has no way of reacting to this.
But that's why you make the enum in 32.max value to start off with if you want most aggressive.
Right.
But seriously, most aggressive will always be most aggressive for all time. There will never be a mostest aggressive, right?
Right. And if it's the double, then you just pass 1. Be as aggressive as you can get. And if the GC says, okay, we're internally calling that mode 9, then like whatever. That like they signal their intent of be this percentagely aggressive, and the GC rounds it wherever it wants to.
Now, what are our versioning rules for enums? I thought that enums basically don't really version, but that's from a long time ago. Can we add constants to enums after the fact, or does that cause versioning issues?
Yeah. You just can't modify existing constants because that's a breaking change.
Okay.
So.
I mean, and Peter, to your point about our rules about what we consider breaking have definitely changed over time. Obviously, we could break an app just by introducing a new enum. We could break an app by introducing a new method on a type. So we've cataloged, we've classified it as non-breaking, and we're happy to do it because otherwise we couldn't evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. So most aggressive, what Levi said, we would call that int.max value, even if the API, when you set it to int.max value, turned it into 9, because. Otherwise, because you can't renumber something once it has a number.
Okay.
Because the number is what gets baked into the IL, not the name. And that goes back to the previous. When you built with maximum was 5, and now you're running later, and that turns out what you really said was be extremely loosey-goosey. And that's not good.
To that point, like using an int that's bounded between 0 and int.max value, or using a double that's bounded between 0 and 1, like honestly, it's the same thing.
Yep. Right, but 0 to 1 double is more what we use to convey percentages, and this really feels like it's an aggression percentage, and then either nan or nullable to represent I don't have an opinion here.
Yeah, I think in particular, users are used to having a 0 to 1 double, even though double can go up to, 1E308. Users aren't very used to having an int that's only 0 through 10, and where everything above it is invalid. Outside of like length, where you've got another property describing what that limit is.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm okay with this being 0 through 1 as a double, and nan or not specify or nulls or.
Yeah, do we have an opinion whether nullable or nan is better here?
I
I
vote
think-
for Nan. But
Yeah, I vote for Nan as well. It will never be a valid value for the GC to interpret otherwise, and so it's
Right.
very good as a placeholder for whatever the GC wants the default to be. It could
So
be
what-
it could be 0.5, it could be 0.1, it could be anything.
So double dot is nan, we would expect people to call that.
I mean, if we really think that the only thing readers are really doing is logging it, then they don't call double dot is nan. They just log it, and it prints itself as NaN. If they're really doing save and restore, then we probably want a complicated thing for save and restore. Because to me, this feels like it's really a write-only setting that we don't like write-only settings, so we're having a getter because we don't like write-only settings.
Can't we just say that a negative value means not set instead of going back to nan?
I mean, it's when you start up the app and you read it the first time, it has to have a value. We can say that's -1. We can say that's nan. Nan is really, there's no number here. We could also call it nullable. It doesn't really matter. Again, the GC can use a double with nan, and the public API uses a nullable that's bounded between 0 and 1. Like, we can do whatever we want.
Okay. It's just I'm not used to APIs intentionally returning nan. I guess I would defer to Tanner on that though, and let me know if it's actually not that uncommon for APIs to intentionally return that.
It's fairly common in the case where you want something that is effectively a placeholder value. It's just like where we use -1 to represent buffer length, because we don't want to hard code that as a constant into the default parameters, or WPF, for example, uses it to represent that a length was not specified in control size. Rust and other languages use it to do niche filling on nullable. That way you don't have to carry around a pointless bool and slow down your code.
All right. So I know my personal preference is that we don't introduce a new type for this because it's just a GC setting. I think that the new type would make sense if instead of it being setters on this type, it was getters, and when you wanted to build a new goal, you got to pass the values and then it normalized them for you to give you a hint. But like, that sounds way too complicated. I would just put it on GC settings. It's already a bunch of, you need to be really smart to know how to use this correctly.
Or have Mary's cell phone number and give her a call when you need some assistance.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I would say being able to contact Mayoni on your own time automatically qualifies you as smart.
It's one of the best things about being at Microsoft.
So are we happy with the name then? Assuming we are all happy with putting it on GC settings, are we happy with optimized memory, or is there a better name we can think of?
So my quick stab combining the names of the type here and what is memory optimization goal.
Okay.
So
Sounds reasonable to me.
So later we would have like throughput optimization goal.
Yep.
Instead of like optimization goal, memory optimization goal throughput. I'm more used to like seeing things that belong to the same category start with the same letters, but that's
a good thought.
Yeah.
I mean, we can. Certainly memory optimization goal hits the describe things in English heuristic.
Maybe we could do like optimization goal underscore memory. So, so later we'll have,
I don't think we have underscores in our APIs, do we?
Very few.
Only for cases where we gave up.
Yeah, we added a bunch of them for TLS cipher suite names, because without the underscores that are their actual spec names, there are ambiguities in interpretation. But
Yeah.
So the setter will forbid any value that's not nan or 0 through 1, correct?
Yep.
So a value of 1.0 is allowed, even though the GC probably will not implement it correctly. Okay.
Well, doesn't one just indicate like be as
Try as
aggressive
hard
as you
as you
possibly can?
Yeah.
Of course, in reality, we'll have to stop short of that. Otherwise, the app slows to a crawl. So we have to, as GC implementers, form an opinion about, how slow can we possibly be and still do what the user wanted.
Yeah, that seems reasonable because this is ultimately a request, right? Not a demand.
Yep.
Yeah, I see 0 as be as lax as you're willing to be. Not necessarily never run garbage collection, but be as lax as you're willing to be. 1 is be as aggressive as you're willing to be. It's not literally my working set must not increase more than if I was writing perfect code in C, because that's if you want that, use C.
Okay.
Also, you can't control what malloc does. It probably allocates in chunks of 1K.
I'm just curious, what impact? So I set this to keep my working set as small as you're willing. Like, what does that mean in terms of how frequently the GC runs and how much time it takes to run and all that kind of stuff? That doesn't impact the API. I'm just curious for my own purposes.
Well, if you set it to something like 0.9, what it would mean is you're aiming for 90% useful stuff. And whenever that increases to 100%, you run the GC. So in other words, 10% is sort of our wiggle room where we can allocate without running GC, and then we run GC. In terms of pause time, etc., I cannot tell you because that will depend very much on your heap size.
Presumably also Gen 0 promotion rates and other things, because if Gen 0 cleaned it up quickly, you wouldn't need to do more aggressive things, right?
Right. Right now, our implementation for Exchange only actually considers Gen 2 and LOH, but we will probably also trim down the budgets for Gen 0 and Gen 1 in the future.
I see. Okay, thanks.
All right. So, are we happy with memory optimization goal? And that when there are 3 goals...
The one question I have is, we went with nan because we don't like nullable.
I think we went with nan because it doesn't need to be super user-friendly, and why waste the byte?
Yeah, I don't really see why this needs to be nullable, but... Also, none of the other GC settings currently is nullable.
No, I mean, we only have 3 right now, right? So it's a very small set of types, or a very small set of settings. I mean, the only downside with nan is that it will look odd when you log it, right? Like, will people understand that that means, oh, it's just the default setting?
Yeah, I mean, if they log it, it'll just print as NaN, and if they look at the docs, it'll say it.
Not that this is in public API or anything, but we do log nan in our tooling.
Right, and WPF takes and uses nan to mean non-specified in all of their stuff. So anyone using WPF already has to think about, consider, and deal with the possibility that nan is logged, which is likely a lot more than anyone using GC settings memory optimization goal.
We certainly hope so.
Ship it.
Yeah, works for me.
Peter, Mariani, that's good for you?
It's good. No objections.
All right, and because we are finishing a thing with at exactly time, we didn't run over by 15 to 45 minutes today.
Yeah, should we try to get the
Hey.
unmanaged call attribute in or not? Because it seems it's easy enough, and if it unblocks somebody, that would be good. Is Aaron still on the call?
Okay,
Go on
bye.
here.
Bye, Maoni.
Good, man.
I'm
Bye,
gonna
Maoni.
go as well. Bye. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So,
I feel like I
We
see
did this
Aaron.
last time with another com interop related thing, and I think Jeremy and Emo were there, and they're like, "Yeah, fine, sounds great." So, I'm not saying it's going to be the same thing, but it's probably close.
I've reviewed this already. Sounds great. Ship it.
seal the attribute, mark it, allow multiple false, ship it.
Oh, multiple false. I forgot about that. That's a good point. We already had something. I'm just trying to provide symmetry. This is only going to go on DL import. It's about extending calling conventions. It follows the same pattern as the existing unmanaged callers only.
Yeah,
The-
so why not use one of the existing attributes? That part's not immediately clear to me from looking at the issue.
Can you elaborate on that, Levi? Sorry.
Because wouldn't this actually go in the DLL import attribute itself normally?
So the
am I missing?
DLL import attribute is a pseudo attribute. It's not real.
Hmm.
The DLL
yes.
import is actually embedded in metadata. So I can't extend that.
Right.
So
Yeah, that was
yes,
the
I
problem.
would love to do that.
The only two questions I really had were one, should this also apply to delegate, because we have the unmanaged function pointer attribute that goes on delegate. We could say that users are just expected to use proper function pointers instead, and I'd be fine with that.
Yes. So that is exactly what you said, Tanner. Like the guidance nowadays is do not use delegates for that. Use function pointers, pass them around.
And then the only other question was, I wasn't a super big fan of unmanaged callee, and I think I suggested an alternative like just unmanaged callconv, which might be a little bit more straightforward for the average user, and fits in with the existing callconv types that you're expected to use in it.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like while Tanner, while you were talking, I looked through our public API service for the term callee, and I just don't see anything relevant. Like there's some stuff in some OOB packages, but nothing that's actually in like the SDK proper.
So it's purely to provide, because there is unmanaged callers, because that is declaring a managed function for native. And in this case, we are declaring a native function for manage. So that was the symmetry that I was trying to go for. But I'm not against unmanaged call conv either. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm not strictly against unmanaged callee myself either. I think it does provide good symmetry with unmanaged callers only. I was just trying to indicate I'm not a huge fan of the name callee, and so I suggested an alternative, but I don't think this should block the API design or decision or anything, and ultimately users will figure it out.
Yeah.
So,
Would unmanaged callback attribute be reasonable?
Oh no,
that's...
I
okay. All right.
Yeah, it's not a callback. It many of these are going to be used on DLL import in favor of like for example, if we expose vector call in the future, you'll put this on a DLL import.
Right. This is okay.
And so it's really just specifying the calling convention in a new and more extensible way than the pseudo attribute, since that was a fixed number of bits.
Because unmanaged callers only is the callback, right?
Unmanaged callers only is it could be the callback, sure. it is declaring a function that will be called by unmanaged code. Yes.
Right. And this is, I'm declaring the p invoke, and I want to tell you what calling convention to use.
In an extensible way, yes. That is a great way of putting it. I can't imagine anybody putting this on anything other than DLL import.
And maybe com imports, we said, right?
Right. Yeah, that would be another. That's an option. We could extend this to be class, but we can instead of just method. But that's a longer term thing. But that's another example of it.
In that case, I kind of vote for, basically calling it literally unmanaged call cons and effectively passing in the calling conventions directly to the constructor rather than having this settable thing, because that makes it, I think, a bit more intuitive, because then you just say unmanaged call cons and then it's just type of X, type of Y, type of Z, right?
That doesn't match what we did for unmanaged callers only. And part of that is because no type specified means platform default.
Sure, you can still have a version that doesn't take any, right? Which is just unmanaged call conf, right?
That's fair. Again, this was more of a symmetry thing, because that's how it's declared on unmanaged callers only.
I guess I have to look up the attribute.
Yeah, I would rather have symmetry with that attribute than try to make this one perfect, to be honest.
Yeah,
I would agree with that.
So, Aaron, quick question. Do you imagine this being actually honored by the runtime, or is this only for the source generator stuff?
Oh no, the runtime will honor this.
Okay.
Ideally, how this whole thing works is right now, if someone said, I want to p invoke into a native function that is vector call, we're broken. It's never going to happen. We can't do it. This will allow users to say, this is a C-style function that supports vector call, and now we can at least have a way of doing that.
And do you imagine other stuff being added to this in the future? So say, for instance, we didn't have suppress GC transition attribute. Would that have nominally gone on this type? Or maybe you just pass type of suppress GC transition call con or whatever into the constructor?
I don't think we'd have been in that situation because we required suppress GC call con suppress GC transition for function pointers. Unmanaged callers only, this attribute and function pointers, all the types they take are all the system runtime compiler surfaces call conv star types, and so they're all sharing the same effectively lookup mechanism to determine what the actual calling convention is now. This is just extending that to DLL import as well.
Okay, yeah, I guess my question was, would we have preferred to make that not an attribute in its own right, but only to have a call con for it?
Trying to think. Oh, I see what you're saying. Got it.
Oh, you mean not the call conf suppress GC transition, but the actual suppress GC transition that you put on DLL import today.
Yeah, the actual attribute. Like if we had this, would we have not introduced that previous attribute and just said, look, you have a call con, go for it?
I think that's a fair, that absolutely could have been a conversation. Yes.
Okay, so that gives some demonstration of this flexibility then.
Yes. The whole reason, sorry, quick digression here. The whole reason we had to put it into a call conv is because we couldn't find a place to put an attribute on a function pointer.
No, and that totally makes sense. I understand that. Yeah,
I agree with you. I think that if someone would have had that vision, yes, we could have avoided that attribute entirely.
Okay. And that's also why it would potentially make sense to have multiple types in the constructor parameter here then, because you might want a proper calling convention plus a calling convention that like indicates some runtime or GC behavior or
right.
something like that.
And call con member function or whatever we called it as well. The new one that's going to be used for com standard call plus this call basically.
Aaron, your comment here is actually imprecise, right? The semantics are not identical to WinAPI; they're identical to platform default.
WinAPI is platform default.
We can. Yes, you're right. You're right.
Oh, right. The thing we call calling convention.WinAPI is not WinAPI; it's actually platform default.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I can change it however you.
Yeah, that's fine. I thought that was simply a Windows-centric view of the thing, but you're actually the API was Windows-centric. The behavior is platform default. Okay. So are we sticking with Kali or are we calling it callconv?
I've been convinced callconv makes sense. Unmanaged callconv makes perfect sense.
And convs plural, correct? Or we don't care. Okay.
Yeah, I think conv is fine because it's multiple attributes defining one convention.
Okay. That's fair.
I also kind of like call conv when you look at it from the perspective of extending it to com types in the future, because the callee isn't the class you're putting it on. You're defining a calling convention for the class instead.
Just out of curiosity, what's the behavior if you put unmanaged callconv, which implies platform default, and have a DLL import that has an incompatible convention? You imagine that's just a runtime failure?
Sorry, say that again.
So you have DLL import calling convention cdecal or something, and then you have the unmanaged callconv attribute with either an incompatible or no calling convention at all specified.
So this will only be looked up if you specify WinAPI or on the attribute. If you specify anything, we will only look up this attribute if WinAPI or no calling convention is specified. If you specify something in the metadata, we always trust that.
Even if you specify things like suppress GC transition here, it'll get ignored?
Yes.
That seems odd.
Well, there's a different attribute for that.
Right. Like this is very much around the lines of, if you specify the calling convention, which I think kind of goes to Tanner's point, if you specify the calling convention in the normal way, that's what we will look for. We're not gonna charge you the cost of looking up an attribute.
But didn't we just say that this attribute is useful not just for a typical platform calling convention, but also a pseudo calling convention that changes runtime or GC behaviors,
Right,
such as suppress GC transition?
In that case, you would specify WinAPI. You would have the DLL import not specify a calling convention, or use WinAPI, and you would use suppress GC transition plus cdecal, for example, in this attribute.
Okay. Because maybe suppress GC transition is a bad example because we already have a standalone attribute for it, but if we were to introduce something similar in the future.
Yeah, and I think the answer is simply that you have to just move where you changed that stood call or cdecal or any of the other things, is you move it from the old DLL import into the new unmanaged callconv, and now you can specify both things.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's a doc issue, and maybe if we're feeling generous, an analyzer.
Yeah, an analyzer would be pretty trivial to say like, oh, you're specifying a calling convention in DLL import and unmanaged callconv. Don't do that.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to create the work for people to write an analyzer, just because I don't imagine a whole lot of people are going to be bitten by this, and maybe documentation is sufficient, but throwing it out there as, is this value add? Who knows? Maybe you know.
That's a very fair observation, I think.
Stupid English language. Okay. Well, because you need it in noticeable and you don't need the E in valuable. And yeah. Okay. That's why I have copy editors and proofers. And yeah,
you need far too many E's in calling.
You write one book and you act like an expert.
So I suppose the type is non-nullable, right? It's just the array is nullable, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Do we want the property to be get set, or do we want constructor overloading?
Oh, it has to be a field if we're going to match unmanaged callers only.
Oh, it actually field was what you really meant.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we did that before because who cares?
This is all this is all just around the what does DLL import do? Kind of what are those interop attributes? We're just unfortunately propagating, I think, designs that we no longer like.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, seems good. It's also inherited should probably be false, right?
Yeah, I don't even know what it would mean to inherit something like this.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't think you can put a DLL import on a virtual, and I don't remember if inheritable means goes to overrides. So.
Well, the interesting thing there will be with static abstracts and interfaces. You could now define a static extern on an interface that's also abstract, and then I think
I'll
that's
be honest with
legal.
you. If we start defining,
You're fired.
yes, that's basically what's going to happen. That's not how you deal with interop, as far as I'm concerned.
Is extern abstract even like legal?
In IL, I think it is, yes. I don't know if C# allows it.
Excellent.
And that's a bug if it does.
Well,
Nope.
I'm saying it's legal in IL ASM. Whether or not the JIT complains about it is a different story.
I guess
allows a lot of stuff.
Extern, I guess for delegates, externs have to have. I don't know if they're abstract, but whatever. They're extern and not actually legal.
Fair enough. Okay, I think we're good on this one, and
Ship it.
I need to terminate by apparently 2 minutes ago, so I will hit approved and be nice and do the completion paperwork, and then I'm out of here.
Thank you all.
And then maybe at some point we'll actually get to the backlog.
I mean,
not today, obviously.
We still have red, so
37 issues. Yeah.
And Immo, I need you to schedule the preview API review for the generic math work. We have to do an early preview of that, so we know that all the work I'm going to do over the next 3 months isn't for naught.
I know. I mean, I didn't even schedule it yet. It's because I kind of predicted that today there will be fallover. So, like,
right.
I will probably schedule it for Thursday in order to do the string interpolation before.
All right.
All
okay,
right,
Internet.
Then,
I have to terminate the stream. They may keep chattering, but I unfortunately am necessary for you to keep seeing the chatter. So, see you later.
I